So I'm going to be looking at a piece of research that I did with a colleague in chemistry, looking at the pharmacology of substances that you can buy freely over the internet. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a very brief background about legal highs. So what are they if you're not familiar with them? I'm then going to give you the aims of our research. So why did we do what we did? Briefly, I'm going to cover the methods and the results before looking at the implications of our research, both in relation to public health or ill public health, if that's how you prefer to phrase it, and the implications it has for the criminal justice system. So what are legal highs then? Legal highs are also known as novel psychoactive substances, and they are basically a new narcotic or psychotropic drug in pure form or in preparation that is not already controlled by the United Nations drug conventions, but which may pose a public health threat comparable to that posed by substances listed in these conventions. So one you're probably familiar with is methadone, which we have now bought under the Misuse of Drugs Act as a Class B drug. So novel psychoactive substances tend to include a range of chemical, but they can also be herbal products. And they're all sold on the back of, they mimic traditional illicit recreational drugs, if you like. Trouble is, they are, because they're made in a laboratory, they are emerging at an astounding rate. So you can see 81 new substances were created or found or identified last year. So new novel psychoactive substances are appearing at an alarming rate. And they estimate it's around one new substance per week. All of them are synthetic. Most of them fall into the families of methadone, so the banned cathinone family, the new synthetic cannabinoids we're starting to see, and we're seeing a range of synthetic opioids being created, which is akin to heroin. They can be bought from a variety of outlets, so obviously the internet. It was estimated there are about 651 online shops last year. Head shops, festivals, so music festivals, any sorts of festivals, market stalls, and on high street shops, depending on which high street. So Camden, they're freely available all down the high street. They're sold under a number of guises. So they're not sold as drugs, they're not sold as legal highs, they're not sold as novel psychoactive substances. They're sold as plant food, research chemicals, or bath salts. Don't put them in your bath and don't feed them to your plants. And the problem with them is they are unregulated. There are no checks or balances on these products whatsoever. They are all sold as not fit for human consumption. So sellers and producers use this loophole to evade any form of control or regulation, either in terms of medicine or in terms of food or in terms of drugs. It means they've never been tested on humans. They are unknown in terms of safety. We don't know what sort of chemicals they are because they are brand new. We've never seen them before. And as I said, many first generation and second generation legal highs like methadone have now been bought under the Misuse of Drugs Act. And so our research basically looked or set out to look at whether bringing them under the Misuse of Drugs Act actually works. So our purpose was to ascertain whether cathinone derivatives were still being sold under the guise of newly labelled legal highs 18 months after they were banned. Because there is some research before ours that suggested that despite bringing drugs under the Misuse of Drugs Act, they were still being sold, repackaged, rebranded and sold as something else. So actually it made no difference to their availability to people buying them on the internet. The users didn't know what they were buying, but they were still freely available. So this is basically what we did. We chose 5 internet sites at random. We selected 22 products to purchase, and we made sure there's about 8 different ones. So we made sure that we bought the same product from a variety of different shops. So there was a crossover so we could make comparisons. We made sure that all the products were bought 18 months after cathinones were bought under the Misuse of Drugs Act in 2010. So they were made a Class B. And we qualitatively analysed them using this chemistry. Please don't ask me about the chemistry, that's where my colleague John Bond comes in. These were our results. So we basically found that 23% did not contain the ingredients listed on the website. They contained something else. All said not fit for human consumption on the package, which wasn't a shock. 23% provided information on how to use the substance. However, it wasn't useful if you were an actual user. So they had things like 0.5 grams will give your plants incredible growth, and the product is to be dissolved in water. So keeping up that guise. 13% contained benzocaine. And both of our Energy 2 products contained 4-MEC with traces of 4-MMC, which is basically methadone or cathinone, part of the cathinone family. So basically, they contained Class B drugs. So what does their implications have then in terms of public health? What we know about these drugs is there is a lack of medical knowledge about legal highs, including their toxicity, so how much it takes to overdose on them, how they metabolize in the body, their effects on people's health, both in the short term and in the long term, and how they interact with other substances, particularly drugs like alcohol or the more traditional illicit drugs, if you like. Toxicologists even struggle to detect these drugs. Because they're brand new, they have nothing to compare it against. They also struggle to detect the metabolites in a human body because they don't know what they're looking for, because these chemicals are so new and they're emerging at such a rapid rate. Medical practitioners struggle to identify the toxicity or overdose symptoms. So even if you present yourself to A&E and they don't know what they're looking for. And even if they did correctly identify what drug you've taken and what you've taken too much of, they are ill-equipped to deal with that problem because they don't know how to deal with these drugs, because there's a lack of scientific and medical research in this particular area. The drugs are of unknown purity and strength. The drugs we brought, so the Energy 2 products, were over 99% pure. So you were literally buying over 99% pure methadone, or cathinones in that case. So they're of unknown purity, they're of unknown strength, they're of unknown chemical composition because they are unregulated. So users are being exposed to unknown drugs in unknown concentrations in unknown quantities. And we don't know how they interact. So if you're mixing particular substances, they might interact unfavourably in the body. We also found that pharmaceutical drugs like benzocaine, which are often used to cut illicit drugs like cocaine, were highly prevalent in these sorts of substances. And we know that benzocaine in high doses can negatively affect a user's health. They were also found in multiple products. So a user could be using 3 different products and be taking 3 doses of benzocaine. So users are also prone to allergic reactions in terms of benzocaine, and benzocaine is also linked to a toxic blood disorder that can be life-threatening. So they were some of the public health implications. In relation to the criminal justice system, what this showed was that Class B drugs were available to buy in bulk on the internet. We could have bought 1 kilogram of this substance. Now this research is 4 years old and the legal highs market has moved on quite a lot. So whether banned cathinones are still available, we don't know. But some of this information still applies to the drugs as they stand and the drugs available for people to buy. Users purchasing products containing banned compounds are breaking the law. So they are subject to prosecution under the Misuse of Drugs Act because these are Class B drugs and ignorance is no defence. It's difficult to understand whether companies selling these products know they're breaking the law or if they think they are selling legitimate products, so legal drugs if you like. The burgeoning legal highs market is unpoliceable. These drugs pose a problem for the police. The police see them as legal, so why should they be testing or stopping people from using them? It's also about policing the internet, which we know is problematic. We also know that a lot of these drugs are coming in from other countries like China and India. So policing drugs and supply coming in from overseas has always been problematic. And we know from policing drugs, traditional illicit drugs, that if you press down here, it pops up somewhere else. You have the balloon effect. So you don't actually get rid of the supply, you just displace the means of how it's coming into the country. The scale of production is unknown. Chemicals are being imported from China and India, but again, why would customs stop them? Because they're presumed to be legal and allowed to be used in this country. We've also seen the blurring of licit and illicit drug markets. So not only does the research suggest that illicit drug users are incorporating legal highs or novel psychoactive substances as part of their pharmacological repertoire, but we've also seen benzocaine and lidocaine being used in these products, which further blurs the demarcation between licit and illicit drugs. Supply reduction initiatives don't seem to be working. And drug legislation prohibiting legal highs seems to be ineffective and thus unenforceable. So just to summarise then, despite being bought under the Misuse of Drugs Act in 2010, banned cathinones were still available to buy over the internet in large quantities. So quantities that would enable for me and John to go out and supply them to other people. package them up and supply them to other people. We didn't. Legislating on these substances is not reducing supply or demand. And are we actually pushing users to go on and use newly emerging and possible more harmful substances? And for those of you who are interested, you can go and read our article. It's freely available and open to the public.